Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we are back with another very interesting Papo figure this time. And yes, this is the very first time I have ever reviewed a Papo dragon on my channel, because this is the Papo Sea Dragon. Now this is a figure that was actually requested by someone to review on the channel. I can't quite remember who it was that actually requested it, so I do apologize to that person. But there was a request for the Papo Sea Dragon to be reviewed, and I didn't actually have it at that time, but once they had requested it and I searched for it on Amazon real quick, I remembered that this was actually a dragon that I did want to get my hands on, because I felt like it was, like the pose was kind of similar to the Papo limited version of their Spinosaurus, so I was kind of drawn to it for that reason. And now actually having it here, you know, it's definitely pretty cool. So of course, we're going to get a review up for it, and if you guys like the review of this, maybe I'll try to get more of Papo's dragons at some point in the future, maybe review some more. We'll just have to wait and see. But again, it is pretty darn cool. Like, when it comes to I guess a sea dragon, like, that looks about as sea dragonish as I could possibly imagine. Sculpt-wise, it looks really nice, of course, because it's a Papo sculpt. Papo sculpts are always, well, that's not true. Most of the time, they're really nice until you see things like their Concavinator and Protoceratops. Paint-wise, I would say it's not quite up to Papo standards, and, you know, what has been pretty typical of Papo lately, which is definitely a bit terrifying, because we have the release of a few new Papo figures coming for 2024, like their Suchomimus, which I am so excited about, so I'm really hoping the paint jobs are not bad on the new figures. But again, this figure does look pretty fun, so let's go ahead and jump straight to a closer look at it, and we'll check it out from there. So, starting up here at the head sculpt, you can definitely see, again, it's got quite the interesting look to it, as well as quite the interesting sculpt. First of all, you can see a nice little, like, horn on the nose of the dragon. You can see some very nice looking scale detail. You've got some more, like, spikes here hanging off of the lower jaw. Even though the paintwork isn't really that great, you can see there's a decent bit of variation of color, as we've got some variations of greens up here on the top. You've got a little bit of a darker tone there on the tip of the snout. You've also got a brown with a little bit of green added down here, and then it's almost reversed here, where the green is more abundant than the brown, but it looks like both of those tones are still there. You've got some darker tones as you lead back toward the eye area, like halfway through the eye socket, it kind of becomes like a darker variation of a green. You've also got some browns up here added, so definitely a lot going on when it comes to the coloration of the face. We also, of course, have an articulated jaw, as you would expect for a Papo figure. On the inside of the mouth, you can see the tongue sculpted out in there. There's a little bit of variation of color, as it looks like we've got like a light pinkish tone with a reddish wash in there. A little bit more of the reddish wash down on the inside of the mouth rather than on the tongue, but it's definitely on the tongue as well. And you can see the detail back there in the throat actually looks really good. Same deal for the detailing on the inside of the mouth and the upper side. It's just a little hard to really get in there without the lower jaw getting in the way. But it looks pretty cool. You can see the teeth are definitely a bit sloppy when it comes to the paintwork. They have very kind of erratically placed teeth, like they're all over the place, almost like, you know, how you see like the Indominus Rex or the Scorpius Rex, or actually more like the V-Rex, I would say. That's a pretty good comparison. The V-Rex and the way that the teeth are just kind of like all over the place is sort of the way you see the teeth on this dragon, and that looks pretty cool. Also up here on the snout, you can see kind of like a tear in the skin right there, and we have that same tear over here. So I don't know if that's like an injury exactly, or if that's just the way that the dragon is, but you can see the jaw works pretty nicely overall. The teeth interlock as well, which looks pretty nice. There's a yellowish tone for the eye, given a black pupil. Also sports a gloss coat. There's a little bit of a gloss coat as well on the inside of the mouth. As you lead over here, I don't know exactly what you would call these sticking out of the side of the head, kind of like a fin, I guess, since it is a sea dragon. And you can see that area is pretty nicely sculpted, and there's a little bit of a variation of color, as you primarily have like a yellowish tone, but there is a darker, kind of like a brownish tone as you get closer to the head of the dragon there. As you lead up here into the top of our dragon, you can see quite a bit of variations of browns. As you move down along the back, you have like a sail sort of a look, or a fin-like look moving down along the back of the dragon. And that is sculpted pretty nicely as well. As you can see, it's kind of wavy as you move along, which does help to give it a pretty cool appearance, and also the look of it kind of swimming through water. It has some variation of color, as we have blues, like some whites, and then greens, and then also some brownish tips on most of the areas of it. It doesn't look super smooth as far as the paintwork. Like, the greens aren't, all that great when it comes to the way that they're placed. They're a little bit sloppy, but I have seen worse. And in fact, as you move down here and you look at the way that the browns are applied with like a dry brushing, they don't really look that smooth or that great. It's like kind of sloppy as far as the way that that's painted. Very much so kind of reminds me of the way that they had painted the Styracosaurus a few years ago, and the way that that was kind of sloppy. And then as you move over here, you can again see what I guess would be like a fin or something here sticking out of the side of the head. As you move back here, you can actually see the gills of the sea dragon, which is actually really cool. I didn't see that over here. Oh yeah, there they are. So you can see them on the other side as well. That's a really nice touch that you may just kind of skim past and not even notice. But again, you can see the same thing going on as far as the sculpt and paint. You've got a greenish tone for the body. As you can see, the paintwork's a little sloppy as it's been like dry brushed over. The transition isn't really that smooth. It looks more like paint rather than body color. You also have like a line of like scoots that move along the underside of the throat of the dragon down here. You have a nice brownish tone. Kind of looks like maybe there's a dark wash, like a darker brownish wash for that light brownish tone down there. Those scoots turn into ridges here as you move along the underside of the throat, but they change to a grayish tone of color. The first grouping here of them doesn't have that. It's just the brown, but as you move back, they start to change to a grayish tone as you lead into the chest of the dragon, and you can see the entire chest area kind of almost has like a bit of an armored sort of a scoot-like look to it. You definitely see the darker wash in this area though as well. And then if we come back over to this side, I did notice there's an awkward, kind of an ugly seam right here. I don't know, it's just like some extra material on the dragon. You can see some nice wrinkling in the skin though, with the long neck turning toward us. You would expect there to be some wrinkling and creasing, and they have put that into the figure. You also have an articulated arm, well, two articulated arms because you can articulate the other side, but what's cool is it can kind of go forward and back like this, up, down, and then forward and back. So there is some pretty nice mobility in the arms. In the front arms only, you don't have that in the legs, but in the arms of the dragon, that's pretty cool actually. I really do like that, and I've never seen that kind of articulation on a Papo figure before. You also have, again, this little area here kind of sticking up off of the shoulder area of the dragon. You've got like a yellowish tone for the underside, a greenish tone for the upper side, which is the same sort of green that we see for the primary body color. Moving down through the arm looks very muscular, again very rough and rugged as far as the skin texture goes. We have that same sort of like fin-like look hanging off of the back of the arm here, off of the back of the elbow, and then you move out into the hands. The fingers are sculpted pretty darn nicely, and you can see the nails as well are painted pretty nicely and sculpted nicely. They have a fairly genuine sharp look to them, also a little variation of color to them as they have a darker tone but like a dry brushing over top and a gloss coat, which is nice to see. And you can see the underside actually looks really quite nice. I like the way that they've painted the underside of the hand with the dark wash right there. Definitely helps to make that detail pop. As you move back, this is the one area that kind of reminds me of the limited edition version of the Papo Spinosaurus. The way that this leg is positioned is kind of the same way that the leg was positioned on the Papo Spino. This figure is just way smaller than the Papo Spinosaurus though. But as you move down, you can see again the muscle definition. You can also see like some scoots moving down the front of the thigh, and then as you lead down you can see the knee. There is a pretty obvious seam right there in the knee where they didn't hide that very well. Clearly the leg was connected in that point, that area, and they did not hide the seam at all. As you move down though, you can see the foot lifting up off of the ground, some nice scoots running down the toes. The nails are again painted and sculpted quite nicely, and obviously the paint is kind of the same way that we saw it up there earlier in the figure, where it's just sort of like dry brushed over, so it's not really smoothly transitioning from one color to another, which is a little bit of a bummer. Up here though, you can see that kind of armored look that we have painted with the brown running along the course of the upper side of the dragon starts to taper away. You've got a few more of those scoots as you lead out into the tail, and then you have like a almost like a paddle-like tail, similar to the Spinosaurus here, out on the end of the tail here, again with like this fin-like sort of a look, and that as well is sculpted really nicely as you have a nice waviness to it, really helping to give the figure the look of like traveling through the water, and then one little area out here again with like another fin on the end of the tail. Lots of curving here going on with the tail as well. And if you move along the underside, again, it looks pretty decent as far as the sculpt goes. Not that great as far as the paint, but not too bad. Over here, again, we have that same type of articulation with the arm. Again, you can articulate it just like we did on the other side as you lead back. The only big difference you're going to see, I think, on this side is the fact that you can see a little more of the stomach because this leg is trailing much more so than the other side there. And again, this leg, though, you can see is up in the air where it sort of looks like it's swimming as well. The seam is much better if it's not just one full piece and they didn't connect it. I don't know, but I don't see a seam in the knee on this side. You can see the foot again looks pretty decent over here, and then we lead out into the tail yet again, just like we saw on the other side. So overall, again, for being one of the very first Papo dragons that I've ever actually gone out of my way to purchase, it's kind of cool. As far as a size goes, for a length from the snout to the tail, about 9¼ inches, maybe a little bit over, or around 23½ centimeters. And then for a height, and now this of course could be a little bit different. If you push the arms in, you could probably make it a little bit taller, but in the position it's in currently, around 3¼ inches or about 8½ centimeters. For a size comparison, there is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Colovosaurus Robert Muldoon in the Collect A human being next to our Papo Sea Dragon, and you can definitely see that it's got a pretty decent size to it. Again, it's not huge by any means, but it's not small either. I would say it's like a decent medium-sized figure. Now, as I said earlier, I don't really usually purchase dragon models. I don't have very many. Occasionally, I'll get some in a random lot here and there, which is exactly what we are looking at here. Is we have a Schleich dragon that I did acquire in a random lot a while back. I did have a Papo dragon at some point, but I think I gave it to my son, so it's no longer around here anywhere. But if you do happen to have this Schleich dragon, then that hopefully will help to give you an idea of the size of this Papo Sea Dragon. And then for just a few random comparisons, as I said, with, not having many dragons to compare with this, we just have like a Mattel Velociraptor and Dilophosaurus stepping in here for another comparison. And then again, a few more random figures that I often use for comparisons with the Schleich Diabloceratops and Collect A Deluxe Dimetrodon. And then the final figure that I will bring in for a comparison here is the Papo Spinosaurus that I was just speaking of, that has kind of a similar look to it where it's sort of swimming along. Obviously, the legs are definitely different, and even the one leg that is similarly posed to the dragon is on the opposite side of the body on the Spinosaurus, but it was just something that, again, I think the same sculptor probably worked on both of these, so the same similar sort of positioning is occurring on both figures. But clearly, the Papo Sea Dragon is so much smaller than the Spinosaurus. So this Papo Sea Dragon is kind of fun, honestly. Like, the sculpt is really nicely done, and when it comes to a super cool mythical sea dragon, like, this has pretty much every aspect of that said creature that you might want or expect to see. Again, covered in fins and stuff. It's got gills. It has a pretty cool, like, fin-like sail moving down, even a paddle-like tail like a Spinosaurus has. So it's got all of the things that you would want to see on a sea dragon, at least as far as what I would expect to see. It's also got a really highly detailed sculpt, and again, it's Papo. You always expect a super highly detailed sculpt. Like, that is by no means a surprise. It also does sport some surprising articulation, as the articulated jaw isn't really surprising. It works nicely, but the arm articulation is kind of surprising to me, as I've never seen that type of articulation on a Papo figure before. The area where the figure kind of falls a little flat for me is the paint apps, and this is a consistent problem from Papo. Over the last few years, their paint apps have declined in quality drastically. One thing that Papo was always known for, at least from when I got into collecting Papo models, it was how good their paint apps were. I don't know if they switched factories or what, but they need to look into a different factory and switch back or something, because the paint apps of their newer figures are less than impressive, and that's the same case for this one. It's not terrible, it really isn't, but it's not Papo quality. It's not what I would expect to see from them. It's pretty sloppy overall, nowhere near as precise and just generally beautiful as what we've come to know and love from Papo. So another really nicely sculpted figure that is hindered by a kind of ugly paint application, but overall it's still pretty fun. I don't know if I would say it's worth the like $30 or so that the figure costs, but it is still kind of a fun figure. But if you are interested in grabbing one and adding it to your collection, I will include a link in the description to where I purchased mine on Amazon. So make sure you grab this if you'd like, and of course like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.